My name's Kyle Bennett. Never in a million years did I think I'd be standing in my own bedroom doorway, just watching. It's been a good 10 minutes now. My wife, Stephanie, tangled up with some guy I've never seen before. I had plenty of time to pull out my phone and start recording. The worst part? They still hadn't noticed me. I snapped a few pictures too, but the whole thing was getting, well, kind of repetitive. I took a moment to really look at the guy. He wasn't taller than me. He wasn't younger or more fit, either. Honestly, he looked like the kind of guy you'd forget a few minutes after meeting. Brown hair, average build, just like me. And yet, here he was. What was the appeal? Then it hit me, he wasn't me. That was it. The age-old cliché. She wasn't with me, so that was enough. How did I get here? I came home a day earlier than planned from a business trip, and I see this unfamiliar car in my driveway. That should have been my first clue. I should have turned around and left. But no, I had to go inside and find out for myself. Why did Stephanie have the nerve to let her lover park right there, out in the open, for all our neighbors to see? We live in a quiet cul-de-sac, one of those neighborhoods where everyone knows everyone's business. What if someone noticed? Did she even care? Finding your wife in bed with another man should probably send you into a rage. But honestly, the thing that stung the most wasn't the betrayal itself. It was that in 18 years of marriage, Stephanie had never shown any interest in anything like what I was seeing right now. Our sex life wasn't bad. I thought it was fine. Vanilla, sure, but I figured that was just how we were. Until now. What I was witnessing in that bed was a side of her I had never known. The passion, the way she moved, none of that was for me. I couldn't even wrap my head around the filthy things she was whispering into his ear. Words I'd never heard from her lips before. And they were meant for him, not me. I didn't feel that stereotypical urge to fly into a rage. I wasn't about to grab a gun or storm over to my daughter's room to grab her aluminum bat. Yeah, I was furious. I was hurt, confused, everything a husband in my position would feel. But there was no violent impulse. I think because, deep down, I already knew. My marriage had been over for a while, even if I hadn't admitted it to myself yet. And then I noticed something. Sitting on Stephanie's nightstand, just inches away from where she was tangled up with this guy, was a brand new box of condoms. We hadn't used those in years. Not since we had our 2 daughters, Claire and Olivia. After Olivia, our youngest, was born, Stephanie insisted I get a vasectomy. She said we were done having kids. I had hoped we'd try for a son, but she shut that down fast. Another regret to add to the pile. As I stood there, I saw something else was missing. Stephanie had always kept 4 framed photos on her nightstand, a little shrine, she used to call it. But now, 2 of those pictures were gone. The biggest one, a family portrait we took when the girls were toddlers, and a smaller one from our wedding day. Gone. The only photos left were of our daughters. Was this some kind of twisted attempt to respect me? Hide the evidence? I wasn't sure, but I knew where those missing photos were. Stephanie had this habit of tidying up right before the cleaning crew came. She'd toss everything into this expensive dresser she had in the corner, like clockwork. Sure enough, I quietly opened the drawer, and there they were, hidden away, out of sight. I couldn't stay in that room any longer. I grabbed the photos and left, quietly slipping out of the house. It was only 3 p.m., so I decided to stop by the office. I'd been gone for a few days, and there was probably a pile of useless paperwork waiting for me. When I got there, I went straight to my office, closed the door, and put the photos down on my desk. I didn't know why I brought them, but there they sat, staring back at me. I knew what I had to do. I picked up the phone and called an old college friend of mine, Robert Kingston. He's a family lawyer now. Back in the day, he was the rich kid who lived among us regular guys in the dorms. His parents put him there to learn humility, he used to say. Now, he insists on being called Rob, which always felt pretentious, but hey, that's who he is. When I called his office, I had to go through 3 different assistants just to get to him. Typical Rob, too important to give out his personal number. When he finally answered, I got right to the point. Rob, I need your help. He paused, knowing something was seriously wrong. What happened? He asked. I told him everything. How I had walked in on Stephanie and her lover. How they were probably still at it while I was sitting in my office. "Damn, Kyle," he said. "What do you want to do?" "Divorce," I said. "But I want them both to feel it." "You've come to the right guy," Rob replied. "First things first, you don't live in a no-fault state, which means we can really go after her. But even if we prove she cheated, you'll probably end up paying alimony. Stephanie hasn't worked in years, and you make good money. It's just the way it goes." He paused, letting it sink in. "But if you want custody of the kids, it's going to be a fight. Not impossible, but tough." I didn't hesitate. "Do whatever it takes. Money's not an issue." Rob sighed, probably already calculating the cost in his head. "You should never say money's not an issue to a lawyer, Kyle," he said, half joking. "But I get it. I'll have my investigators on this by tomorrow. We'll need more than just the photos and video you've got. We need to dig into everything about this guy and their affair. It'll take time, but we'll get it." I agreed, not really caring about the cost. Rob told me to act normal around Stephanie in the meantime. Play it cool until we had enough to take her down. The idea of pretending everything was fine while knowing what I knew, it made my stomach turn. But if this was what it took, I'd do it. I hung up and sat there, staring at the photos. This wasn't supposed to happen. I'd always thought we were solid, that our marriage was different. But now, everything seemed like a lie. A knock on my office door snapped me out of it. My assistant, Marie, poked her head in, looking concerned. "You okay, boss?" she asked, hesitant. "Yeah, Marie. I'm fine," I lied. "Just got back from the trip and decided to catch up on some work." She didn't look convinced. Marie had been with me for over a decade. She knew when something was off, but she also knew when not to push. She glanced at the photos on my desk before leaving. I stayed at work for a couple more hours, trying to sort through emails and paperwork, but my mind was somewhere else. I kept thinking about how I was going to pull off this act of normalcy when I got home. I had no idea how to face Stephanie, especially after what I'd just seen. When I finally left the office and drove home, my thoughts were racing. I still didn't know what I was going to say or do when I walked through the door. But when I pulled into the driveway, Stephanie must have heard my car, because she met me at the door, putting on her best smile. "Kyle, you're home early," she said, sounding way too cheerful. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile. "Surprise. I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow. Dinner's almost ready, but it's nothing special since I didn't know you'd be here." "That's fine," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I'm not really hungry anyway. Just need to change out of this suit." I headed upstairs, trying not to look too much into her eyes, because every time I did, I saw her with him. I felt sick. Halfway up the stairs, the girls ran to me, their faces lighting up with joy. "Daddy!" Claire and Olivia squealed as they threw themselves at me, hugging me tight. They were the only thing keeping me grounded in that moment. I hugged them back, fighting the urge to break down. "I missed you guys," I said, holding them close. "Missed you so much." The girls eventually let go, and I continued up to the bedroom. I don't know what I was expecting to find when I walked in, but the room looked completely normal. The bed was made, everything in its usual place. It was almost like nothing had happened at all. The sheets even smelled fresh, but that just made it worse. Stephanie must have noticed me staring at her nightstand. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said casually. "I broke a couple of the picture frames while cleaning. Took them to Aaron Brothers to get them fixed." I didn't say anything, just nodded and started changing my clothes. At some point, she left the room, probably to check on dinner. I stood there for a long minute, trying to hold it together. That night, I did my best to avoid her. I spent time with the girls, helping them with their homework. Dinner was painfully quiet. Usually, it was noisy and full of laughter, but that night, the tension hung in the air. The girls could sense something was off, but thankfully, they didn't ask. Stephanie barely looked at me, her face a blank mask. After the girls were in bed, I poured myself a drink and sat in my office, what Stephanie liked to call the man cave. It was the one room in the house that was truly mine. It was cozy, warm, filled with my books and the old leather chair I refused to replace. Stephanie hated it, called it an eyesore, but I loved it. I knew I'd have to face her eventually. I was thinking about how I was going to act when she made the decision for me. She walked into the office, nervous. She wrung her hands together, something she only did when she was on edge. "Come here, Steph," I said, patting my lap, forcing a light tone. "Sit with me." She seemed relieved and quickly sat down. I gave her a quick kiss on the cheek, playing the part of the tired husband. "I'm sorry I was so out of it at dinner," I said, trying to sound casual. "The trip didn't go as planned, and I've got a lot on my mind." "It's okay," she replied, perking up. "I knew something was bothering you. How about tonight I help you forget all about work?" And just like that, we ended up in bed. It was like our usual routine, gentle, predictable, nothing like what I had seen earlier. She acted satisfied, held me close afterward, and even whispered how much she loved me. "I love you, Kyle. You've made my life complete." I almost choked. How could she say that? How could she lie so easily after what I had just witnessed? But I didn't say a word. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling as her breathing slowed and she drifted off to sleep. I didn't sleep a wink that night. All I could think about was how this woman, the one lying peacefully next to me, had been with someone else just hours before. How could she sleep so soundly after betraying me like that? The next morning, I woke up before her. I needed to get out of there. I got dressed and left the house before she or the girls were up, leaving a note on the whiteboard in the kitchen, saying I had to leave early for work. For the next 2 weeks, I acted like everything was fine. I put on the show, just like Rob had told me to. Stephanie, on the other hand, seemed on edge. She was overly affectionate, constantly telling me she loved me, complimenting me, trying too hard. I could see right through her. Meanwhile, Rob's investigators were digging. I was just biding my time, waiting for the moment we'd have enough evidence to blow this whole thing open. During those 2 weeks, Stephanie's behavior became almost suffocating. She was constantly hovering, asking if I needed anything, telling me she loved me every chance she got. It was like she knew something was up, but she couldn't figure out exactly what. I, on the other hand, kept my distance. I focused on the girls, on work, and waited for the call from Rob. And finally, it came. "Kyle," Rob said over the phone, his voice serious. "We've got everything we need, but this next part is going to hit you hard." "You sitting down?" I sat at my desk, already bracing myself. "Yeah, hit me." Turns out, the guy Stephanie's been seeing isn't some random fling. His name is Ryan Davis, and they've known each other a long time, way before you two were married. In fact, according to our investigation, he and Stephanie hooked up the morning of your wedding. A few hours before the ceremony. I sat there, numb. I should have been furious, should have lost it right there and then. But I didn't. I just felt empty. "How'd your guys find this out?" I asked, my voice surprisingly calm. "It's better if you don't know the details," Rob said. "But trust me, this information is solid. Now, here's the other thing. Ryan's been married for 10 years, got 3 kids under the age of 8. He's been living a double life. And the worst part? Your daughters, Claire and Olivia? They know him as Dad." I felt my stomach drop. "What the hell are you talking about, Rob?" I demanded. "My guys got video footage," he explained. "Last Sunday, while you were at home cleaning the yard, Stephanie took the girls to the park. Ryan was there. They had a picnic, and the girls called him Dad. The 4 of them looked like a family, holding hands, laughing, the whole deal. Everything went dark for a second. I felt dizzy, like I was going to pass out. When I came to, I was slumped over my desk, Rob still talking to me through the phone, his voice distant. "Kyle, you still there? You okay, man?" I shook my head, trying to clear the fog. "Yeah, I'm here. I'm fine." "Listen," Rob said, his voice softer now. "I know this is a lot. But here's the thing. Ryan married his wife because Stephanie didn't want to divorce you and be with him. They've been carrying on this affair for years, but he has no intention of leaving his family for her. He's playing both sides." I was silent for a long time. My mind was spinning with everything Rob had just told me. My daughters, my own flesh and blood, had been calling this guy Dad behind my back. And Stephanie? She had been playing me for a fool for our entire marriage. "So, what do you want to do?" Rob asked, breaking the silence. "I want to ruin them both," I said, my voice cold and steady. "That's what I wanted to hear," Rob replied. "But it's going to take some time. We've got the evidence, but we need to build the case. In the meantime, you're going to have to keep acting normal. Can you handle that?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Yeah, I can handle it." Over the next few weeks, I kept up the charade. Stephanie kept playing the doting wife, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. I went through the motions, but inside, I was already planning my escape. The girls, though, they made it harder. Every time I looked at them, I felt a stab of guilt. They were innocent in all of this. They didn't ask to be caught in the middle of their mother's mess. But as time went on, I started to feel dead inside. The weight of everything was crushing me, and I just wanted it to end. One day, out of the blue, Rob called again. "Kyle, we're ready to move forward, but there's something else I need to tell you. And this one's even harder than what I told you before." I laughed bitterly. "What could possibly be worse than what you've already told me?" "DNA testing," Rob said. "We can't say for sure yet, but based on everything we found, there's a good chance Claire and Olivia aren't biologically yours." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "And there's more," Rob continued. "Ryan has been part of their lives for longer than you think. They know he's their biological father, Kyle. They've known for a while." It was like the world had dropped out from under me. I didn't even know how to respond. The girls, my girls, they'd known this whole time? I thought back to all the times I'd held them, played with them, helped them with homework, thinking I was their dad. But the whole time, they had another father, and I was just, what? The guy who paid the bills. I managed to choke out the words. "When can we serve her?" "Soon," Rob said. "Very soon. But you need to brace yourself for what's coming. This is going to get ugly." And he wasn't wrong. When I got home that night, I sat in my office for hours, thinking about everything Rob had told me. I wanted to rage. I wanted to confront Stephanie right then and there. But I knew I couldn't. Not yet. Those days were like living in a nightmare. I pretended everything was fine, but inside, I was spiraling. I felt trapped, like I was living someone else's life. Stephanie, of course, kept up her act. She was almost too perfect. She made dinner every night, helped the girls with their school projects, kissed me on the cheek like nothing had changed. But I knew it was all a lie. I was waiting for Rob to tell me when we could serve her, but it felt like it was taking forever. Each day dragged on, and every minute in that house felt like torture. Stephanie must have noticed something, because she was acting even more anxious than usual. She'd ask me if I was okay, if I needed anything. The whole routine was starting to make me sick. Then one evening, out of nowhere, she walked into my office. Her hands were wringing nervously, which immediately caught my attention. Usually, she avoided my office like the plague. It was my space, a place she always said was too messy for her liking. "Kyle," she said, her voice softer than usual, "can we talk?" I put down the paperwork I was pretending to focus on and looked up at her. "Sure," I said, keeping my voice calm. "What's on your mind?" She walked over to the couch, sat down, and tucked her legs under her. She looked vulnerable, nervous in a way that was unusual for her. "I've been thinking," she started, then paused. "I know something's been bothering you lately. I can feel it. We've been together long enough for me to know when something's off. And I just wanted to say, I love you, Kyle. I really do." Hearing those words made me want to scream. How could she sit there and lie to my face after everything she had done? But I kept my cool, playing my part. "I love you too," I said, even though the words felt like poison on my tongue. "But you're right. Things have been off. Work's been rough lately, and I've got a lot on my plate." She nodded, like she believed me, like she didn't suspect a thing. Then, to my surprise, she stood up and walked over to me, wrapping her arms around my neck from behind the chair. "I know it's been hard," she whispered, her breath warm on my skin. "But I'm here. We'll get through this together." It took everything in me not to push her away. Instead, I leaned into the lie, letting her hold me. But inside, I was fuming. That night, after she had fallen asleep, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. How could she do this? How could she carry on like everything was fine? It was like I was living in some twisted version of reality where nothing made sense. The next morning, I left early again, avoiding any chance of a conversation with her. I just couldn't stand being in that house anymore. Every corner reminded me of what I'd seen, what I knew. I needed to get out before I lost my mind. At work, I buried myself in whatever tasks I could find, but my mind was never fully there. I was just going through the motions, waiting for the inevitable. Then, finally, Rob called. "Kyle," he said, his voice filled with urgency. "It's time. We're ready to serve her." My heart raced. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for. But at the same time, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. There was no going back now. Once she was served, everything would come crashing down. "We've got everything lined up," Rob continued. "I'll have the papers served at your house this afternoon. Make sure you're there. It's going to be a shock, but we need to hit her hard and fast." I agreed, though my voice felt distant, like someone else was speaking for me. That afternoon, I left work early and drove home. The whole way, my thoughts were racing. How was this going to go down? How would she react when she realized everything was over? When she saw the evidence? When she knew I'd been one step ahead the whole time? I pulled into the driveway, and as soon as I stepped through the front door, I knew something was different. Stephanie was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. She looked up when I walked in, flashing me a smile. "Hey, honey," she said. "You're home early." "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile. "Thought I'd knock off a little early today." She nodded and went back to chopping, completely oblivious to what was about to happen. A few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Stephanie's head jerked up, and I could see the confusion in her eyes. "Who's that?" she asked. "I'll get it," I said, already knowing what was coming. I opened the door to find a man in a suit standing there, holding a thick envelope. "Kyle Bennett?" he asked, even though he knew the answer. "That's me," I replied, keeping my voice steady. He handed me the envelope. "You've been served." I nodded, taking the papers without a word. I could feel Stephanie's eyes on me as I turned around and closed the door behind me. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice shaky now. I handed her the envelope. "You'll want to read this." She stared at the papers in her hands, then slowly opened the envelope. As she began reading, her face went pale. Her hands started to shake. "Kyle, what is this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's over, Stephanie," I said, my voice cold. "I know everything. About you and Ryan. About the girls. All of it." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She just stood there, frozen, as the reality of the situation sank in. "I didn't want it to come to this," I continued, my anger finally surfacing. "But you left me no choice. You betrayed me, you lied to me, and now you're going to pay for it." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel a shred of sympathy. "How long?" I asked, my voice hard. "How long have you been seeing him?" She looked down at the floor, her voice barely audible. "A few months." "Don't lie to me, Stephanie," I snapped. "I know it's been going on for years. I know about the park, about the girls calling him Dad. So don't stand there and try to play innocent." She broke down then, sobbing into her hands. But it didn't matter. Nothing she could say or do would change what was coming next. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the kitchen, clutching those papers that would officially end our marriage. But the part that stung the most was still the girls. Claire and Olivia. Every time I thought about them, my heart ached. They were innocent in all of this, and yet they were about to be dragged through a nightmare they didn't deserve. I loved them, and no matter what their biological connection to me was, they were still my daughters. They had no idea their world was about to come crashing down, and I wasn't sure how I was going to face them when the time came. The next few days passed in a blur. I avoided going back to the house, and when I wasn't at the hotel, I was in my office, trying to stay busy. Rob told me to be patient, that we were in the early stages and things would take time to unfold. But I was itching for it all to be over. Then, one day, Rob called me into his office. He sounded excited, like he had something big to share. Kyle, we've got her, he said, as soon as I sat down across from his desk. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? He grinned, sliding a folder across the table. My investigators did some more digging into Ryan's life. Turns out, he's not the saint Stephanie thinks he is. He's been cheating on her, too. With multiple women. And we've got the proof. I stared at the folder, my mind racing. This changed everything. Stephanie was already neck-deep in her affair with him, but if Ryan was cheating on her, too? That could destroy whatever defense she might try to use. And it made me wonder, did she even know? What do we do with this? I asked, flipping through the evidence inside the folder. We use it to our advantage, Rob said, leaning back in his chair. This gives us leverage. We can show the court that not only was she cheating, but she wasn't even the only one in his life. It'll make her look bad, and it'll strengthen your case for custody. I nodded, feeling a sense of vindication. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had the upper hand. Stephanie had been blindsided by her own choices, and now her perfect little world was starting to crack. Does she know yet? I asked, looking at Rob. Not yet, he replied. But she will soon enough. We're planning to serve Ryan with divorce papers from his wife, too. Once that happens, it's only a matter of time before she finds out. The thought of Stephanie being blindsided by Ryan's betrayal gave me a sick kind of satisfaction. She had put me through hell, and now she was about to feel it herself. But at the same time, it didn't make me feel any better about the girls. No matter what happened between me and Stephanie, they were still going to suffer the fallout. A few days later, I decided to finally go home. I couldn't avoid the house forever, and I needed to see the girls. When I walked through the front door, the house felt cold, empty. Stephanie wasn't there, but Claire and Olivia ran up to me as soon as they heard the door. "Daddy," they cried, their voices full of excitement. "We missed you." I knelt down and hugged them tight, trying to hold back the emotions that surged inside me. I had missed them too. So much. And it broke my heart to think that everything was about to change for them. "I missed you both so much," I said, my voice thick with emotion. We spent the evening together, just the three of us. I helped them with their homework, made them dinner, and we watched a movie before bed. For a few hours, everything felt normal again, like it used to be. But I knew it was just temporary. Later that night, after the girls were asleep, Stephanie came home. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. She barely met my eyes as she walked into the kitchen, her movements slow and deliberate. "Kyle," she said quietly, "we need to talk." I stood by the counter, crossing my arms. "What is it?" She sat down at the kitchen table, staring at her hands. "I know you're angry. I know I hurt you. But I'm asking you, begging you, to reconsider what you're doing. Think about the girls. They need both of us." I didn't say anything, just let her talk. "I know I screwed up," she continued, her voice trembling. "But I love you, Kyle. I always have. I made a mistake." Her words didn't move me. Not anymore. I had heard it all before, the same empty apologies, the same pleas for forgiveness. But it was too late for that now. "You didn't just make a mistake, Stephanie," I said, my voice cold. "You destroyed everything. Our marriage, our family. And now you want me to just forget about it? Pretend it didn't happen." Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't feel any sympathy. She had made her choices. Now she had to live with them. "I know it's hard," she said, her voice cracking. "But I love you, Kyle. I want to fix this. I want us to be a family again." I shook my head. "It's too late for that." She sobbed quietly, burying her face in her hands. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I didn't feel the need to comfort her. "I'm going through with the annulment," I said firmly. "I've already talked to Rob. You're going to lose, Stephanie. And you're going to lose big." Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. "What do you mean?" I met her gaze, unflinching. "I know about Ryan. And I know he's been cheating on you too. We've got everything we need. The affair, the girls, all of it. You're done." She sat there in stunned silence, her face pale. For the first time, she realized just how badly she had underestimated me. "I'll fight you," she whispered, but the fight was gone from her voice. "I'll fight for the girls." "Good luck with that," I said, turning to leave the kitchen. "You're going to need it." After that night, everything changed. The house felt like a battleground, with Stephanie and me barely speaking to each other unless it involved the girls. She was trying to hold on, but it was clear that she knew the end was coming. The tension was unbearable, but I was holding my ground. I wasn't about to let her manipulate me anymore. Then, one afternoon, Rob called with some final news. "Kyle, it's done," he said. "We've served Ryan's wife with the divorce papers, and we've got all the evidence lined up for your annulment. This is going to go public soon, and once it does, there's no going back. Are you ready for that?" I thought about it for a long moment. I knew that this wasn't just about the divorce anymore. This was about exposing everything Stephanie had done, and it wasn't going to be pretty. But at this point, there was no other choice. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady. "Let's do it." Within days, the news started to spread. First, among our friends and neighbors, and then, eventually, through legal channels. The annulment papers were filed, and the court documents made it clear that Stephanie's affair was just the tip of the iceberg. Ryan's involvement, the girls, and his own infidelity, all of it was out in the open now. Stephanie was devastated, but I couldn't bring myself to feel any pity for her. She had dug her own grave, and now she was lying in it. Ryan's wife had left him, and he was facing his own legal battles. The life they had built on lies was crumbling, and there was no way to fix it. The hardest part, though, was the girls. Claire and Olivia were too young to fully understand what was happening, but they could sense the tension. I tried to shield them from as much of it as I could, but there were some things I just couldn't protect them from. They didn't know why their mom and I weren't together anymore, and I wasn't ready to explain it to them. One evening, Claire asked me a question that nearly broke me. "Daddy, are you and Mommy going to be okay?" I knelt down in front of her, looking into her innocent eyes. "We're going to be okay," I said softly, even though I wasn't sure how true that was. "But sometimes, grown-ups have to make hard decisions." "Is it my fault?" she asked, her voice trembling. My heart shattered. "No, sweetie. None of this is your fault. Mommy and I we're not going to be together anymore. But that doesn't change how much we love you and Olivia. You'll always be our girls." I hugged her tight, trying to hold back my own tears. I wanted so badly to tell her everything, to explain why this had happened. But how do you explain something like that to a child? The next few weeks were brutal. The annulment went through, just as Rob had predicted. Stephanie didn't fight it as hard as I thought she would. Maybe she knew there was no point. She lost the house, lost the financial security she had grown accustomed to. Ryan was out of the picture now, dealing with the fallout of his own broken family. The girls, though, stayed with me. The court had ruled in my favor, granting me primary custody. It wasn't easy, and the process was grueling, but in the end, I came out on top. I was relieved, but at the same time, I knew the fight wasn't truly over. Stephanie would still be in their lives, and we'd have to figure out how to co-parent. But at least now, I was in control of the situation. Months passed, and life slowly started to settle into a new kind of normal. I was still living in the same house, but it felt different now. Empty. The girls brought life to it, of course, but the weight of everything that had happened still hung in the air. I wasn't the same person I had been before all of this started. I was more guarded, more cynical. But I was also determined to rebuild, to give the girls the stable life they deserved. One evening, I found myself sitting in the kitchen, staring at a photo of the four of us, Stephanie, me, and the girls, taken years ago at a family vacation. We all looked so happy, so carefree. I realized then that the happiness in that picture was real, at least for me. I had loved Stephanie once. I had built a life with her, had children with her. But she had taken all of that and thrown it away. As I sat there, I thought about everything I'd gone through, the betrayal, the lies, the hurt. And yet, somehow, I felt lighter. I had survived it. I had come out the other side, scarred but stronger. And now, I was focused on what really mattered, my daughters. That night, as I tucked them into bed, I felt a strange sense of peace. Claire and Olivia were my world, and no matter what had happened between me and Stephanie, that wasn't going to change. I kissed them good night and headed back downstairs, ready to finally let go of the anger I had been carrying for so long. Maybe, someday, I'd find a way to fully forgive Stephanie. But for now, I was content to move forward. I didn't need her in my life anymore. I had my girls, and that was enough. Thank you for visited my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.